you ready, Marilyn?
Yes.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Sean Conway. I'm the attorney for the Community Development Commission. Our chairman, Mr. Ochoa, is running a little bit late. We do have a quorum present, so we will begin the meeting. He will be here very shortly, but we want to make sure everybody is able to present their cases in due time. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Babelis?
Here.
Ms. Rudnicki?
Here.
Mr. Parenti?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Woods?
Here.
And Ms. Zabko is absent.
Okay, the CDC does have a quorum present. We just need a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 20th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed say no. All right, the meeting minutes are approved. Okay, we are now going to move on to our public hearings. As we typically do, as the attorney for the CDC, I do help facilitate the public meetings or the public hearings for the folks in the audience. I just facilitate the meetings. I do not vote. I do not comment. I just keep the meetings, the hearings running along. Okay, so we will start with our public hearings for the night. For our public hearings, all testimony will be given under oath. At the hearing, there will be an opportunity for the public to offer testimony and to comment. Following the public hearing, the CDC's deliberations will be open to the public in the sense that all are invited to listen and to watch. The public, however, may not speak during our deliberations. We ask that the applicants here tonight give specific evidence to demonstrate that the proposal meets the standards of approval for the request. The burden is on the applicant to prove the case. Additionally, city staff will provide a general description of the proposal followed by their analysis. With respect to others who wish to speak, you may give an opinion or present specific evidence as to why you believe the applicant meets or fails to meet the standards for the request. Finally, we will strictly adhere to the schedule prepared for tonight's meeting. However, those wishing to submit evidence and testimony will be afforded sufficient time within which to do so. Whether you're a member of the public wishing to make a statement for the record or a witness testifying on behalf of an applicant, you will be placed under oath and then begin by stating your name and address. You will be subject to questions by the Community Development Commission and potential cross-examination by the applicant. To allow as many people as possible to be heard, we would request that you limit your remarks to 5 minutes. If any additional time is needed, the hearing will be continued until the next available hearing date. And when you present your evidence, we just ask that you step up to the podium, make sure you speak into the microphone because tonight's hearings are being recorded. All right, I'll call tonight's first matter. It's CDC 2023-02. This case involves an application for zoning variations, including reduction of the required side setback and allowing parking in the front yard. These variations are being requested to enable lot consolidation and construction of a building addition. M&E Real Estate LLC and 950 Siebert LLC are the current owners of the parcel. Staff, would you please indicate when the notice of the hearing was published and whether you have the certificate of publication from the newspaper?
Would you raise your right hand, state your name and address, please?
Gosha Pucheha, 404 North Wooddale Road, Wooddale, Illinois.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the public hearing notice was published in Daily Herald on March 3rd, and city staff does have a copy of the certificate of publication on file.
Okay, thank you very much. Is the applicant here tonight? Great. Would the applicant wish to make a presentation?
It's going to be a joint presentation, so you want to swear us both in, Mrs. Geppetto?
Would each of you raise your right hand and state your names and address, both of you, please?
Marshall Subach, S-U-B-A-C-H, 1035 South York Road, Bensonville, Illinois.
Ryan Eagle from
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you again to the CDC. My name is Marshall Subak. I represent the petitioner, who is 950 Siebert LLC. Presenting with me tonight will be Ryan Weigel of Weigel. We also have Ken Lindberg, who is the architect, and also Mike Latoria, who is the consulting construction manager from Latoria Brothers Construction. I'm going to kind of go over the highlights of the project and then have Ryan go over some of the details. We were here a couple months ago. It was about the same weather outside. We had asked for 3 variances back then for this project. It was to do a 12,230 square foot building addition for 950 Siebert. One of the variances was a 5-foot variation from the side yard setback from 20 feet to 15 feet. A lot coverage variation, because we were over the limit for lot coverage, and a parking variation. We were gonna have 39 spaces as opposed to 52 spaces as required. This board approved all those variances. Ryan Weigel then went and did what Ryan does. He took something and he made it better. He started looking at the plan, talking to staff, talking to his architect, talking to ComEd, figures out that there was an easement through the property that ComEd really didn't need anymore. So we negotiated with ComEd, gets them to vacate that easement, and then figures out that he can do a 19,000 square foot building addition and actually connect the 2 buildings and make it better. It eliminates the requirement for the lot coverage variation, and also eliminates the parking variation. The new plan consolidates the lots at 950 Siebert, 935 Central, and there's a triangle parcel that you'll see in some of the drawings that is also going to be consolidated. The combined lot will now be 5.1 acres. The new plan is going to meet the parking requirements of 162 spaces. We're going to have 163 spaces. The plan will meet all stormwater requirements and also meet all landscaping requirements. We are seeking 3 variations. One is the variation for the 5 feet again, because the building was constructed in 1973, 15 feet off as a setback. Now the new UDO requires a 20-foot setback, so we want the building to be in a line. So that's a 5-foot variation. New UDO that was passed for this zoning district does not allow for parking in the front yard anymore. So that is a second variation that we are requesting, to be able to park in the front yard lot, which is that vacant parcel that was purchased, I believe, from the Illinois Tollway in 2016. That'll allow us to meet the parking requirements. And then we're also asking to eliminate a requirement for a landscaping island in the parking lot that Ryan will go over in more detail. As for the standards, I get the boring stuff, he gets the exciting stuff with the PowerPoint. There's some standards you're supposed to look at to show that we can't comply in strict compliance with the UDO, and it creates a hardship. The first one is the unique characteristics of the property. The building that is being added to was built in 1973, again with this 15-foot side yard setback. The new UDO requires 20 feet. To be consistent with the building, we want it to run in a straight line. Any architect and construction manager would tell you that. So we're asking for that 5-foot variation there. As far as the parking in the front yard, when my client purchased this property, parking was allowed in the zoning district in the front yard. Because of the recent changes, it's no longer allowed, so we're asking for the variance for the parking. The next factor to look at is whether or not this was self-created. It was not self-created, because the building, when it was built in 1973, met the codes back in 1973. This is an addition of an existing building. And also, as part of the UDO amendments that were done last May, was not created by us, it was created by the city council. The next factor is whether or not we would be denied a substantial right if the variance was not granted, and we would. And the substantial right is to use that vacant lot to the highest and best use, which will be for parking, and also be able to expand the footprint of the building to allow the business to grow as it is doing. The next factor to consider is whether or not we're granting special priority or special privileges to a certain petitioner, and you're not doing that by the granting of this. It just will allow the business to continue to operate in one building which is gonna be safer for our employees, and a more efficient use of the space. The next factor is whether or not the granting of the variations is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the UDO. Comprehensive plan talks about working with existing businesses to make sure they can be retained into Wooddale, allow them to expand. And the UDO talks about having flexibility with respect to variances to make sure that we can meet the code requirements. So granting this variations will be consistent with the comprehensive plan and the UDO. The next factor is whether or not it fits the characteristics of the area. Ryan has many examples to show you where there is parking already in the front yard. So everything that we're asking for is consistent in the industrial park that goes on there now. And then the last factor to consider is whether or not there's any other available remedies, which there are not. So with that short introduction, I will turn it over to Ryan Weigel.
Okay, well, thank you for having me again, hosting me again. I'm going to go through a brief, and I will try to expedite this as quick as possible to kind of give you a little bit of history of the company again, just a refresher. So, just to give an idea as far as what we do, we are a manufacturer, right? We're not a truck depot, we're not a truck repair shop, we're not a logistics company. We actually make and stamp parts. One of our clients is actually Tesla, another one is being Rivian. So as far as the EV sector is concerned, we're heavy players in that industry. Currently right now, we operate out of 4 facilities, 3 that we own. And you can see the top picture is the example of the 935 and 950 Sievert property. The one in the lower left-hand corner is the Bensonville facility. And then the one to the right is a warehouse facility. Kind of go through the timeline of the company. My grandfather started the day before Pearl Harbor was bombed. My father's here in the audience here as well. We built our current building back in 1978. So we've been in the village since 1978. My brother and sister and I took over the business in 2010. Put the addition onto our existing building in 2011, and that's when we actually acquired at the same time when everything you can imagine during that time, it was pretty distressed. In 2011, we acquired the 950 Sievert site. Along the way, we've added value added in robotics in 2019, and we also expanded in 2021, and then hence we did change our name from Weigel Tool Works just to Weigel now because the Tool Works acronym did not really fit our business profile. Again, a little bit what we do. Components we stamp. So if you have a Ford, Chrysler, GM vehicle, your battery cable connectors, chances are our parts is in your vehicle. Just give you an idea. And again, the presses we have automation, assembly work, and all the processes we do complete. And then here's the Marshall, that takes one.
So for here, this is again a summary of the project and the variations. There's a side yard setback from 20 feet to from 15 feet to 20. That's right along here. The existing building is here, and then this is the.
I had that reverse. Sorry, my apologies.
No, that's okay. So that's the expansion. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so this is really the overview. This existing building here at 935 North Central. This is this northwest corner here. This is the parking lot expansion. We're expanding over here, and this is the lot we acquired back in 2016.
The lot coverage, we're going to meet the requirement of 80%, so that'll be compliant with the UDO code. Parking stalls, we're going to be within 162 as required. We are looking for elimination of the parking lot, the islands. That wasn't part of the original presentation, but in my opinion, I think as a board, you can make a recommendation to staff because they have the ability to make part of this. It just creates problems for snow removal. It's in the industrial park, and you're really not gonna get any benefit,
Yeah.
from a landscaping on
We
it.
were able to create these little pockets here for islands, but in particular, and I'll have other slides, I like to eliminate that parking lot island, and you'll see why here in a second.
And then it's just for the requirement of, for parking in the front yard, setback.
So you can see in the corner here, this lot, this is an extension. What we have over here are permeable pavers, underground storm detention system. These are additional parking here with also storm detention. Again, just another overview. This is the proposed 950 Sievert addition. To the left of the hashed area is the addition portion. As you can see, the parking, I would like to continue it straight out instead of having an island, and I'll get to that in a second. But the other worth noting here is the setback. Existing right now is 15, that's grandfathered in. I like to maintain that setback to the 935 North Central location versus recessing another 5 feet. Obviously, it's going to reduce the overall square footage, and aesthetically and overall performance of the building, it's just going to be more enhanced for our overall conditions. And again, we were achieve a lot with consolidating the lots. As earlier noted, the parcels are owned by my family, one being from my parents at the M&E, Marty and Elsa acronym, and the 950 Sievert lot. So it's owned by the family, so we're able to consolidate the lots in order to make this work. With that, the total lot coverage, we are compliant. The parking stalls, we are compliant. And the islands, again, I'm trying to request for a variance. And the existing building is 25,000 square feet. We're just under doubling the square footage of that overall building. This is my little attempt of copy and paste, just kind of aesthetically what I had in mind. Sorry, Ken. But you can see here that it's just a continuation of the parking lot, and I'll show you another variance here too. So this is what happens to your typical parking lot island. Can't go any grass, can't have any vegetation. This is what happens to it. You see all the chew marks from the plow, the bobcat. You can't put any grass in there. You can't put any trees in there. This is unfortunately, this is what happens to parking lot islands. It is a plowman's nightmare. It might aesthetically look great, but this is what they turn into. Again, just kind of reiteration here that back in May of 2020, it was passed the ordinance that the allowance of no front car parking. And I have to be honest with you, one size does not fit all for this one. What I mean by that is that I see all my neighbors, they have all their truck parking. This is completely different. This is regular car parking lot. This is not a truck depot. Now, as far as the trees are concerned, it has been marked that we're gonna have to remove 22 trees. These are not highly desirable trees, folks, but we have to remove them in order to create this little area for the parking. And you can see overall, it's minuscule in the whole grand scheme of things. And this is a study that was presented to the CDC. Again, what you see here when you drive up, those trees to the left, they're staying. They're not in the impact zone. These trees over here, those would have to come down. And again, these are not trees you would plant in your backyard. This is just a back view of it. This area right here, where you have the permeable pavers, underground detention, would be the extension of the parking lot. And these trees would have to come down in order to add that additional parking. This is just the side, this is the front view, if you will, across the street. Those trees here, the long existing trees, zero impact. Now, I can understand why the board decided not to have front parking, and here's why. We cannot treat them the same. You look at this, unfortunately, I'll say it, if nobody wants to say it, they're eyesores. I get it. I don't want to see this. I don't want to see trucks parked in my front yard either. But you cannot treat them the same. You can see here at my 950 site, clean front yard. Sure, I'll take some of the trees that we had to remove from the 935 site, put over here, but you can see we're sandwiched between two truck repair depot sites. A neighbor, 900 Sievert, again, 960 Sievert. This is what we stare at our 935 north lot. Just a straight shot, straight alleyway. Differently, this is my 935 site to the right, and to the left is the 950 Sievert site. This is the fire lane, this is the area where we would combine the two buildings. We have already got clearance from ComEd that they would do what's called an above-ground easement way. So they have already granted us that permission. The other thing worth noting is that the power poles that affects 935 and 950 Sievert has zero impact on our neighbors. Zero. So if we were to shut down momentarily, our neighbors would have no impact. We do not have to notify them that we're potentially shutting down for a small period of time. And again, this is just our back areaway. The back portion, if you will, we're not necessarily losing a lot of parking stalls. The way it's shaped, we're not losing a lot. We're just extending the parking along the building. And one of the questions was proposed, well, if Weagle adds this building, they're just gonna move, right? That's one of our big presses. It's a stacked press. It's several feet underground, okay? Took several cement trucks even to fill this pit. This press is not going anywhere anytime soon. It will take several months, and quite frankly, we had to buy a replacement press because of it. So this type of equipment does not move overnight. We also require a lot of power. So between power and the type of equipment we have, we're not moving anytime soon, and we like to stay within the community. And again, just highlights earlier what I discussed. Kind of get an idea of our growth, our trajectory. We're here to stay. We keep on investing in our business year after year. We're also a quality standard for automotive, and we're also 14001, which is environmentally standard. We do quite a bit in the community. We like to train our own. We like to also offer apprenticeship programs. We feel the trade is very vital in this country. We just give a little bit of snapshot of what type of earnings that potential that Canada would have. They do apply for the apprenticeship program. We're a strong advocate for that. We also host manufacturing days, Fenton High School being one of them, Elk Grove, local communities as well. We also donate to charities, trade organizations for equipment purchasing for the local trade association. We've also had our the failed bid by Bruce Rauner and Tammy Duckworth has also been our facility. Well, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Subak, do you have any more witnesses that you'll be calling?
No, just answer any questions of the board and staff.
Okay.
And thank you for your time.
Great. Before I open it up to questions, I just have a couple procedural points. Ms. Chapetta, can you indicate that Mr. Ochoa was present at 7:16 p.m.?
Thank you.
in the minutes? Thank you very much. Also, I just want to kind of clear some things up procedurally. In my materials, maybe staff can confirm this. There are actually two variances being requested. The one is to the parking in the front yard, and the other one is to the side setback. In terms of the landscape island, that's not a variation that was noticed for tonight, according to my materials. Always, that's something that you can discuss with the applicant about after the meeting, but that wasn't one of the noticed variations.
Understand, I guess we're just asking for some direction from the CDC, what they would support such a variation, because we can come back on it if
Yeah, and I'm gonna recommend that the CDC do not do that, because that would be, sort of passing on an issue that hasn't been noticed for tonight. Yes, go
If I may add for clarification, and we actually talked about it last time this petition was in front of us. Our UDO has specific list of authorized variations. They're specific to what types of requests could come in front of CDC to be considered as variations. Landscaping requirements are not one of them. So in other words, an applicant cannot seek a zoning variation for any of the landscaping requirements. So our UDO would not even allow this process. The UDO does have a section for administrative relief. So the applicant, as they're going through the permit process, they can request up to a 25% relief from specific requirements that are in there. So that is definitely available in this situation. But even so, we could not have CDC discuss and recommend a zoning variation for landscaping.
Okay, so for tonight, the two variations for your consideration are the front yard parking and the side setback. Okay, just wanna make sure that's clear for all the
Can I just ask one
members.
question then? So,
Yep.
so that can be done with staff, Coach,
The 25%, yes.
and you don't need any direction from the CDC or the city council when a grant that's just within staff's recommendation?
That is correct. There's a specific section that describes, there's a process, and the request has to be put on the landscaping plans, and it just goes through administrative review.
That's fine, thank you for
Okay.
clarifying that.
Great. Okay, are there any members of the CDC who have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Woods?
So you're telling me you definitely are consolidating the two lots?
Yes.
Actually, 3 lots.
No,
Okay.
the triangle was combined. So this triangle lot was combined.
Combined earlier?
With 935. So that was separate. The state took it from us years ago. We acquired it back in 2016. Actually, my father, when he purchased the parcel, he had all the way up to the 390.
But now it'll all be consolidated?
Correct.
Yes.
So the notion of shared parking is null and void.
Do we have any thing in our code about replacing some of those trees?
Yes. Yes, so of the 22 trees that will be removed, 20 of them are on our prohibited list. The Public Works Department has a list of different species that are not desirable based on their history, and a lot of them are invasive. So out of those 22, 21 are prohibited. Those need to be replaced one-to-one. But a number of those 22 trees are actually dead trees. So that's why we needed a tree survey to be done by an arborist, and that was just submitted to us. So essentially, the total number of replacement trees that will be required is 17. So the applicant will either plant them on site, or they could do a fee in lieu of $650 for the required trees. But all of that will be handled during the permitting process.
Okay.
There is one thing I want to clarify, and I want to go back to our previous notes, that when we actually reacquired this lot, we did actually have to pay a tree fee. So I don't know if that applies it on or what have you, but we acquired it back in 2016, we paid a fee up front, and I can pick up my notes and how much we paid for those trees in general.
We can definitely look at that.
What's that? We actually don't own the property, but when we acquired it, we paid a fee to the village and did a tree study and paid that fee already. So now we're double paying.
1971, I bought the whole thing.
Correct.
Any other questions? Okay, none for now. Does staff have a presentation it wishes to make?
We do, and actually, a lot of the information was already covered, so I'll just probably run through this quickly. Just give me 1 second. Sorry, my computer. Obviously, the location map we're pretty familiar with. Just to kind of back up a little bit, there was a typo in the memo, which is my fault. I apologize. I noted that The first time the applicant appeared before CDC was in January, it actually was in December of last year. And essentially, because the scope of work changed, now we're doing a lot consolidation, a building addition that's a lot larger, and the requests for variations are different. The applicants actually had to submit a brand-new application. That's why we're going through this process. You may recall that during the last month's meeting, the item was already on the agenda, but essentially the application wasn't ready, so it was continued until this month. So what we have in front of us would be just the location map. So essentially we are between Seavert and Central, right up to Elgin O'Hare Expressway to the north. In terms of zoning, the property is located in the I-1 zoning district within the TCC overlay district. One of the requirements of the overlay district is one of the variation requests, actually. It's the fact that parking is not allowed in the front or between the front of the building and the front property line. It only applies to the site on Central. Central is designated as one of the corridors, and because of that, the parking requirement is applicable on the Central site. These are just the existing conditions. The 950 Seabird property we have seen before. It is essentially a brick commercial building. Then this is the property at 935. I apologize. There we go. So this is 935, obviously a lot larger. It's over 4 acres in size. So the applicants are petitioning to consolidate the two lots. Lot consolidation under our UDO requirements is something that essentially this request goes directly to City Council. That's why we're presenting the zoning variation request to CDC, but it's really upon lot consolidation that will be discussed and considered by City Council. The building addition we discussed before, it's a little bit over 19,000 square feet, and really the intent of it is to be able to connect the two buildings together. And there's going to be a total of 40 additional parking spaces. So we'll have 12 parking spaces by the building addition, and then there's additional 28 that will be added in front. In terms of compliance with the UDO, there you go. So lot consolidation we already discussed. ComEd was one of the things that definitely was considered because there is an existing easement, and the property owners are doing a lot of work and getting communication back from ComEd to make sure that will be handled. Obviously, during the permitting process, there will be some easements that will have to be finalized, but that could be part of the permitting process and final conditions on the permit. Landscaping we briefly discussed. As I mentioned, landscaping is not an authorized zoning variation, so that process will have to be handled during the permitting. There's only the 25% administrative variation that could be granted, and we already talked about the 22 trees that will be removed during construction. 17 replacement trees will be required. In terms of engineering, typically for just zoning variations, we wouldn't require engineering review, but because this is a big impact on the priority, we actually had the applicants submit preliminary engineering plans that did go through engineering review. There will be sort of a combination of permeable pavers in a detention area that's located next to the parking lot. Our city engineer reviewed it, and they didn't find any specific concerns, so they're confident that whatever comments or questions, they are able to be addressed during the final engineering review of the permit. In terms of compliance with the comprehensive plan, the property is designated as industrial business park, so definitely it is in line with that classification in the comprehensive plan, and it actually helps to achieve goal 2 and a couple objectives, mainly because of supporting of economic development and expansion of job opportunities. So we find that the proposal is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. And lastly, in terms of public comment, staff did not receive any comments from the public or questions during the public hearing process. Therefore, we find that the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan and with the UDO, and we recommend that CDC recommend approval of this petition. Thank you.
Okay. Do any members of the CDC have questions for staff? Does the applicant
Yeah,
have?
I got a question. So with regards to the parking, any conditions that we should be discussing or implementing so that it doesn't turn into, what the applicant showed on the screen?
So definitely, well, so part of the problem, and just maybe, I don't know if I can share that. So the other properties are properties that the city is working on, so obviously we're aware of those other issues. There already are things that are within our code that actually state that, the parking has to be used for that particular commercial occupancy. So let's say, because this is manufacturing, it's probably unlikely that they will have these trucks or trailers on site. I would also state that parking is required to be, so the vehicles must be parked within striped parking spaces, and these are really striped for typical pedestrian, passenger vehicles, so therefore it's unlikely. In terms of conditions that could be placed on variations, I am not quite sure.
So I think my outlook would be, I'm 100% that they will comply. However, 6-12 months down the road, we might have a fellow business down the street seeking the same variance, and what position is that gonna put us in? So I think we strategically need to come up with a condition so that we don't get that, with other potential applicants.
Any other questions?
Gosha, in regards to those parking lot islands, aren't they allowed to have grass and trees in them?
They have to.
You can't grow them in there, that's the problem. Try.
Okay, hold on, let's take this one at a time. The question was to staff.
So our code actually states that you have to have a ground cover, so vegetation, that includes shrubs and grass, and you are required to have a shade tree. There is a minimum size of at least 7 feet in width, that is to be able to support that vegetation. Our code specifically says that you cannot use stone or gravel in the planting beds. So that's really the emphasis, is to have some sort of a green space.
Any other questions for staff?
Gosha, that 25% rule, that would eliminate the need to put in the island?
So it's kind of up to the applicant to present it to us, like how it would be a 25% of whatever the number is. I don't have that information yet, so I cannot definitely say that's going to be approved or not. This was part of the discussion a couple months ago when we talked about it, but at that particular time, the total number of parking spaces that were being added was under 20. And that didn't trigger that requirement for landscape islands. But now, because we're consolidating the lot and we're adding more than 20 total parking spaces for the entire site, then this requirement is applicable. And it really only is to that parking strip that is to the adjacent to 950 Sievert, because the other areas, they don't have rows that are more than 20 parking spaces. They're all kind of broken up, where probably maybe 13 is the largest number. So it's just that one landscape island to the north of Sievert.
I mean, I think the islands are great, but in this situation, I don't see a need. It being an industrial park and a lot of the reasons, that's just my opinion, but for what it's worth, that's where I stand.
Okay. And again, just as a point of procedure, the landscape island issue is not an issue before the
Right.
CDC tonight. Okay.
Actually, it is. I mean, if we're approving parking spaces and that, islands are part of it.
Well, what's before you is a variation for front yard parking and side yard setback. All right, any other questions for staff? Okay, does the applicant have any questions of staff?
No, just in closing though, manufacturing is not only the backbone of the country, but it's the backbone of Wooddale. You're gonna see two different presentations tonight by the same attorney, but they're both businesses that are needed in the city of Wooddale. Weagle, how many employees do you have? 230 employees, very good paying, not jobs, careers in manufacturing. So we need to do everything we can to try to make business as staff has, to make it as friendly as possible and keep these businesses in town. Wooddale lost out an opportunity a couple of years ago when they were looking for a building, and couldn't find it in Wooddale because of the zoning, and actually had to buy it in Bensonville. And Bensonville has the advantage of this highly automated, awesome place that they wanted to be here first, but couldn't find it because of the zoning issues. Nothing that you guys created or staff created, just that the zoning wasn't there. So I appreciate your time, but just keep in mind who this is for and what they bring to the community and actually to the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Subak. Is there any member of the public who has any statements they wish to make as to this particular request for zoning relief? Okay. I'm going to do last call for questions of the CDC before we close our public hearing. Do we have any last questions?
I was just wondering where there are shipments, where there's gotta be, delivery trucks and that sort of thing. Where's their loading docks or where are they located?
So the main facility in 935, we have one recessed dock, okay? I don't know if I can, okay, so.
Right there?
All right, so this facility, we strictly receive material, we process the material, we have a straight truck that takes us to the other facility for warehousing. But these two facilities will just be mainly used for manufacturing purposes. I'm also still actively looking, if you find any good deals, let me know, another warehouse within the city. But these facilities right here will be strictly for manufacturing for the most part, and a little bit of warehousing. We used to ship out of that Seaver location, but then now that converted into more, yeah, so, and we do have another shipping dock out of the Seaver location. That's unfortunately grandfathered in, but there's very little truck traffic that goes through here, which is very nice. You see congestion all day long on Central. We have hardly any of that, especially our truck court in Central.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Any last questions before we close the public hearing portion? Remember, once we close the public hearing, then that time will be for the CDC's deliberations. There will be no more opportunity to ask questions. So any final questions before we close? Okay. There being no additional testimony, do we have a motion to close the public hearing for case number CDC 2023-02?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and we'll do a roll call on this. Marilyn, please.
Mr. Davis?
Yes?
Ms. Wojcicki?
Yes.
Mr. Parenti?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
And Chairman Boccia?
Yes.
Okay, the public hearing portion of this case has been closed. Now it's time for deliberations, and I will open this up to the CDC for any deliberations that you have on this request. Anybody would like to make a comment, statement?
I think the requests from the applicant are very reasonable, and I think we should recommend approval.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't see any issues here. It can't be resolved, and I would go ahead with a yes approval.
Okay, any other members? All right, there being no further deliberation, like I do and have in the past, there is a recommended motion in the staff memo. I will read the recommended motion. If you are in favor of the request, ultimately you would vote yes on this motion. If you are not in favor of these requests, you would vote no. Okay, so I will do the recommended motion, and we will go from there. All right, the recommended motion is based on the submitted petition and the testimony presented. The proposed variations request is consistent with the Unified Development Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan, and therefore I move that the Community Development Commission adopt the findings of fact included within the staff memo dated April 17th, 2023, as the findings of the Community Development Commission, and recommend to City Council approval of the zoning variations for, 1, reduction of side setback from 20 feet to 15 feet, and 2, allowing parking in the front yard in case number CDC 2023-02. Anybody can say so moved.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Chairman Ochoa,
Yes.
Mr. Bayless,
Yes.
Ms. Rudnicki,
Yes.
Mr. Parenti,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
and Mr. Woods.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. The recommendation is for approval of the requested variations. This matter will go to the PZB committee. Gosha, do we know when yet?
I will confirm the dates and get back to the applicant directly.
Great, sounds great. Okay, this matter is concluded. Thank you very much. All right, now we will move on to tonight's second matter. This is CDC 2022-08. This case involves an application that has been filed by Marino's Woodfire Pizza for a special use for a planned unit development, a combined concept and final development plan with certain deviations, site plan review, and lot consolidation to enable construction of a new restaurant located at 364 through 376 East Irving Park Road, 116 West Irving Park Road LLC is the property owner. Okay, staff, can you please indicate when notice of hearing was published and whether you have a certificate of publication from the newspaper?
Raise your right hand, please state your name and address.
Gosha Pocheja, 404 North Wooddale Road, Wooddale, Illinois.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the public hearing notice was published on March 31st in Daily Herald, and we do have a certificate of publication on file.
Okay, great. And do we have the applicant here tonight? Mr. Subak? We do. All right. I will cede the floor to you.
Do you want to swear all the witnesses in at once, Mrs. Gepetta, again?
How many witnesses do you have, Marshall?
Just to answer possible questions, so I just swear them in now?
Yeah.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. For the record, Marshall Subak, S-U-B-A-C-H, 1035 South York Road in Bensonville. Michael Caldwell, 1316 North Madison, South Illinois. Frank Moreno, 136 East Irving Park Road.
Thank you.
Okay, again, I represent the petitioner. Sorry I had to sit through two of these for me this evening. The petitioner is 116 West Irving Park Road, LLC, seeking approval for PUD to build a new restaurant at 364 to 376 East Irving Park Road. The property is currently vacant. It falls under the C-2A zoning district, where a restaurant is a permitted use. Marino's is an existing restaurant in Wooddale for almost 30 years. It's a family-owned restaurant. For the city, it's truly a destination location for not only residents of Wooddale, but also for people who live outside of Wooddale. Marino's is a sales tax producer and employs some of our residents. With me tonight is Frank Marino, one of the owners, Mike Caldwell, the engineer, and then Mike Latoria is the construction manager. You're gonna hear lots of numbers tonight on this presentation, but there's one number you have to focus on. The number is 1,360. You're gonna ask yourself, what is that? That is the number of times my family has ordered from Marino's since they've been in business in Wooddale. Many of my family members think that my wife isn't a great Italian cook, and she is not. It's because of Marino's. So this presentation, this approval, is very personal to me, and I'm also a resident of Wooddale. So, for the love of my family and my children, we're asking you to hopefully approve this tonight. The subject property is at the corner of Irving Park Road and Ash. The site is about a half acre. The proposed building will be 5,200 square feet. The improvements include 29 parking spaces on site, and then 10 shared parking spaces along Ash Avenue, which is under a parking license agreement that was negotiated with the city of Wooddale. The plan incorporates the alley off of Ash, which will allow residents that live south of Irving, like some of you, to access the property from the alley without entering Irving Park Road. The new restaurant is gonna have indoor and outdoor eating in a flexible space that has retractable glass doors. So if we have weather like we have now, those glass doors could have been open on Friday and part of Saturday, and then closed today and yesterday because of the weather. The restaurants also include a 100-seat party room, a small bar and gaming area, and then possible future outdoor rooftop cafe. The restaurant's gonna continue to offer catering, pickup, and delivery services as it does now. I was gonna have the petitioner, just in case some of you haven't had it, bring some cannolis this evening. Stacy was on board. Gosha said, great idea. City attorney said he wouldn't recommend doing that. So you can blame your city attorney that there's no cannolis here tonight. The owners, the architects, the engineers met with staff multiple times over this project, trying to modify the layout to maximize the parking, minimize the number of deviations that are being requested. Please don't be discouraged by the number of deviations we are requesting. Most of them, in my opinion, are not significant. You're gonna see a lot of this because of the amendments that were done, the revisions to UDO. Not saying there's anything wrong with the amendments that were done. It's just new standards are now in place, as you saw before, and you've seen going forward. And when we're redeveloping existing land, not every piece of property is gonna meet those requirements. So deviations, it's not a bad word. A variance, not a bad word. It's just something that we have to work through to make sure we're retaining businesses in town. Petitioner is requesting a waiver of the traffic study that this board has the authority to do. The reason for this is traffic studies get very costly, especially when you're dealing with Irving Park Road. And they, believe it or not, they really don't tell you that much. Example I can give you, I represented the property owner in Bensonville when they had the McDonald's built on Mason and Irving Park Road. They did require a traffic study, and after spending lots of money on a traffic study, the engineer said that the Irving Park Road was a D for traffic congestion, and that after McDonald's was installed, it was still gonna be a D. So it's not the burden on the property owner that are creating these problems, it's just the amount of traffic and the type of road that Irving Park Road is. The positive of this site is actually right now it has 2 curb cuts on Irving Park Road, and with this project, if it's approved as a PUD, we're gonna eliminate one of those curb cuts along Irving Park Road. Again, it's a business that's within the corporate limits that we wanna keep in the corporate limits. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I just had a couple, I didn't know if this got printed out in color, so can I approach and pass these out? I got one already. Awesome. Thank you. So this is just a color rendering to showing you what, hopefully the end product is gonna look like.
Mr. Subak will mark that as applicant's exhibit 1.
Okay, thank you. There are 7 deviations that we are requesting. Deviation is a fancy word that we use instead of variances when you're part of a PUD. It was staff's recommendation for the petitioner to apply as a PUD. It allows this board a little bit more flexibility. The first deviation we're seeking is for the minimum lot size. The minimum lot size in the C2A commercial corridor is 29,000 square feet. This lot is 23,000 square feet. So So that's the first deviation, it's just the size of the lot, okay? The second deviation is to, often before we have setback lines, you've heard it on the first presentation. Setback line, the UDO changes some of the language, and here they have a build-to line that they have, and the build-to line requires it to build from, to 8 feet of the property line. That's shown right here, okay? We don't want to build all the way to 8 feet. We want to only build 9.2 feet from the lot line to allow some outside seating on the ash side of the project. So that's the second basis, the second deviation that we're seeking. The third one is for the height of the side yard fence. The code allows for 3 feet. We'd like to go to 4 feet. Again, it's an aesthetics issue. It allows for a little bit more privacy for people who are dining there, and also allow for a little more screening from the surrounding properties. The next one is for a deviation for the driveway for the opposite side of the street, not to be, it either have to be aligned or non-offset by 100, or at least 150 feet. What the heck does that mean, right? That's right here, sorry. If you can't see, this is our driveway. The new code says that we either have to align with that across the street, or it can't be, it has to be more than 150 feet in even variance. We don't control where their driveway is, so that's the second deviation that we need. But remember, Irving Park Road, we're going eastbound here, they're going westbound that side. So it's not gonna create any issues not having those two exactly line up. I think that's a common one you'll see as far as deviations going forward with the UDO as it's implemented and we get redevelopment along Irving Park Road. The next deviation is for, you can't park within the front yard in this section within 8 feet. Here, one of them is gonna be within, the parking is gonna be within 5.4 feet of the lot line. Just one of the parking spaces right up there. The next variation that we are seeking is to have 2 parking spaces off the public alley meeting a 10-foot minimum transition space. This is right here. There's 2 parking spaces in the back where for pickup, you'll be able to park right there. There's supposed to be a larger area for the transition, and there's just not the space available. So rather than eliminate, that's gonna be great for everybody who lives south side of Irving Park Road. For pickups, you can be able to pick up and park right there. Also, delivery guys can come in there. If you have Uber Eats that comes, they'll be able to pull in there and pull out, okay? Yeah, and there's no objection from the engineer as far as that request for variation. The next one is for the landscaping islands. A little different than the last one. This is a PUD. So under the PUD, you can grant deviations for the landscaping islands. So here, we are required to have, we're looking to eliminate 2 of the landscaping islands. We will still have 4 that will be provided. Of the 4 that are provided, they're not gonna meet the 7 feet wide by 18 feet in depth. But talking to our landscaper in the landscaping plan, they still will be able to have adequate vegetation and trees installed. So we're not asking for any variations on the landscaping. It's just that we're trying to eliminate 2 of the landscaping islands and have the other ones that are not gonna meet that 7 feet by 18-foot depth. Again, if we put those all in, we're gonna eliminate parking. If parking is eliminated, you need as much parking as you know as a restaurant, right? If Mr. Peterson's going out for dinner in his nice 1950 car, if there's no parking available there, he's not pulling in there. He's gonna go somewhere else. So you definitely wanna have adequate parking, but also have adequate landscaping as well. And then the last one again is the landscape, or the waiver of the traffic study, as I previously mentioned. The standards for PUD are provided for in my March 13th, 2023 correspondence, which is part of your packet and asked you to incorporate. I will just go over a couple of the highlights. This is the part of the presentation where we'd be digging into the cannolis right now, right, and not paying attention, but it is a requirement of the code. The first is that the plan will be in harmony with the general specifics of the UDO and the city comprehensive plan. This PUD, if approved, meets goal 2 of the comprehensive plan to build community capacity, transforming city-owned property into tax roll property that produces sales tax and real estate taxes. This property was radioelectric back in the day, then it was bought by the city of Wooddale and advertised for sale. My client negotiated and purchased the property, so we're getting it back on the tax rolls, which is good for all the residents, and getting it redeveloped, because right now it's vacant. It also meets goal 3 of embracing a small town charm throughout while enhancing curb appeal. Believe it or not, you guys a long time ago adopted a comprehensive plan. This property was identified specifically in the comprehensive plan as a possible site for redevelopment for a possible restaurant with outdoor eating. So you guys had the forefront to possibly see that. That made it to the comprehensive plan. We're just carrying through on that. I think our plan's a little better as it's incorporated here. The next factor is whether or not there's going to be any adverse impact on the surrounding properties. All the drainage is going to meet current code. Petitioners using impervious paver bricks as part of the parking lot at an increased cost, but to minimize water runoff. The next factor is whether or not there'll be interference with surrounding developments. And it's being constructed, this property, not to dominate or interfere any existing uses of the neighboring properties. It's going to meet all the other regulations other than deviations of the C2A district. The next factor is whether or not there's adequate public facilities, and there are. We're actually incorporating the alley is to the drive, so people can enter the property off the public alley, and also Irving Park Road, which will cut down on traffic congestion, which is the 5th factor to consider when approving a PUD. Property is also going to incorporate a bike rack for some residents who want to bike to the restaurant, and also have a public sidewalk installed along Ash Avenue for those who park in that shared non-exclusive parking, which is right there. Those are the 10 spaces I referenced earlier. The next factor is whether or not it's going to destruct any significant features. It's a vacant piece of land right now, so we are not doing anything with any existing features. And the last factor, or the 7th factor, is compliance with the other standards of the UDO, which we are. Public benefit, I told you my personal benefit by approving this PUD. The public benefit is we're going to retain a business in town. It's a business that generates sales tax. It's a business that's been a good corporate client for a long, long time in Wooddale, and we want to keep those type of clients here and type of customers here and restaurants here. And then the last factor is whether or not we're minimizing the adverse impact. Again, staff has worked tirelessly with the architect, with the engineer, and the petitioner to design this building and the plan and the parking so that the requests that we're making are minimized. Some of the other factors for the UDO to apply or approve a PUD is uniform ownership, which we have, minimum area, which we meet. There's going to be no covenants or restrictions. That'd be more for a PUD, like for a homeowners association. There's no public space that needs to be contributed, and there's no common open space other than the shared parking. The last thing is the site plan review, which are 11 factors, which are in my correspondence, and you can incorporate into tonight, so you don't need to listen to me anymore. With that, this is a very exciting project for the city And we are here to answer any questions you have on behalf of the architect, petitioner, or the construction manager. Thank you.
Okay, great. Does any member of the CDC have questions for the applicant? Mr. Woods?
The parking on Ash, is that gonna be, I guess it's more to Gosha. Is this gonna be strictly their parking now? Will they be able to put up a sign?
No, the parking license agreement is for it's non-inclusive, it's not specifically for marinos only. It's public parking, so anyone would be able to park in there. But our UDO regulations allow them to use those parking spaces towards their minimum parking requirements. But technically, they're open to anyone.
Okay. Two, go ahead. The entrance to it in the alley, do we have enough clearance there for that drive?
I believe so. Our engineer reviewed it and no concerns were noted. We also sent it to the fire district. Clearance in terms of the height or just,
The depth from the alley to the first parking space?
no, that is one of the requests because we need the 10 feet. Although I think the requirement is more for the 2 parking spaces that are for pickup. I think technically speaking, that is exactly 10 feet. From the property line off of alley to the first parking space that it's in that drive, I think we meet the 10-foot.
All right.
Can we get a laser to show us exactly what you mean?
I think you should, is that in there?
Thank you. This area here.
Yes.
We are expanding the alley at this location. I couldn't say it was exactly 10 feet or not, it's either close, we need that specific dimension to get that. But again, the village engineer didn't have any objection to this.
In regards to the traffic study, I know it's expensive. Is there anything we can do to find out? I mean, I just picture a lot of traffic going down the alley itself. I mean, I would use it, why anybody else wouldn't? And it's very hard to get off of Ash onto Irving Park Road, unless you're just heading eastbound. But if you're trying to get out to the other side, right now with nothing, it's hard. And I'm not against this project. I think this is a great project. I love the building, I love the concept, all of it. But I worry about the traffic. Is there anything we can do?
Can I ask one question, just to clarify, Mr. Woods?
Go ahead.
So, because I don't really, the traffic study would normally, the scope of it would be Irving Park Road. Not really, I don't think they would do the traffic study. They'll do the traffic study for Irving Park Road and Ash. I don't think they're gonna do the traffic study for the alley, because I live over there. I don't know how much people are driving. There's an Italian club up the street, right? I don't think that alley gets a whole lot of use as far as, so are you talking about a study for the alley, or?
For everything in general, if you make a left-hand turn out of their restaurant, trying to go westbound, you are gonna tie up some people in the restaurant, so obviously you're gonna have more cars actually going out the alleyway, you would think, or trying to get out in another direction. It's just hard to get across Irving Park Road to head westbound. And I don't foresee it to be any problem other than maybe lunchtime and dinner time.
Right, so the curb cut on Irving Park Road, that ultimately falls under the jurisdiction of IDOT. So IDOT's gonna have the final say on if they allow westbound out of that, off of Irving Park Road.
I'm good with that.
So, yeah, but understand the concern, yeah. That's not necessarily a right in, right out. That's to be determined by the IDOT people.
Okay. Any other questions from the CDC?
Yeah, regarding the traffic study, Mr. Marino, I can understand why you didn't want it. I wouldn't want it either. I don't think it's necessary. The only question I have, I guess, for Gosha, did the village attorney, or engineer look at it and make any comment?
No, because we, typically what happens is, so a little bit of a background, I guess. Our PUD regulations specifically list a number of documents that need to be submitted. And that was communicated to the applicant that traffic study or form of it needs to be submitted for review. Once we do get it, it is reviewed by a city consultant who is a traffic engineer, so they're the ones that would review it and make sure that the findings are okay with it and whether any comments need to be changed and so on. So the city never received any sort of traffic information to be reviewed. There are different levels of traffic studies that could be prepared, and we offered, instead of doing a complete traffic study, which sometimes it's costly, there is an opportunity to do more of a traffic memorandum, which is less expensive and less timely, but the applicants, once again, per the UDO regulations, have the ability to seek this waiver. And it's something that is being presented to CDC. Under the PUD regulations, Community Development Commission may consider certain waivers of requirements, but staff wanted to have some sort of traffic information in the packet, in the application.
Now, see, I think the danger here, not so much this project, but setting a precedent to have it waived. And I would say that as far as the CDC is concerned and the city council, just be aware of that in the future, that this might become a precedent, and we certainly don't want that. I don't think, I go through Ash all the time. In fact, that's how I came over here from where I live. And that area is congested, but it thins out a little bit because of the traffic lights and the speed, 2 lanes, some are going faster, slower. In my opinion, I don't think it's gonna create a major issue. Is there gonna be more cars? Yeah, but it's not gonna be a big deal, I don't think. So I don't see a necessity, but I guess I would leave that to the village, city engineer, if he feels that it has to be done, but that's my opinion.
So just to clarify, the city engineer did not review anything because there wasn't anything provided. Our requirement is that it has to be provided.
I see.
CDC has the ability to waive that requirement if you feel it's not necessary for the project.
Well, that would be my opinion, and then city council can make a final decision.
So your recommendation is to waive it or?
Waive it.
Thank you. And just to comment on, if the city attorney doesn't want to comment on it, I understand, but I gotta say, as an attorney who does a lot of zoning work, you guys ask very good questions, and you are, I don't think you need to be as concerned as you need to be concerned about, if we grant it now, we have to grant it each time. Each case is unique, each case is different. A car wash going on Irving Park Road and talking about cars backing up. My office in Bensonville is by a cigarette store that's a drive-through. It backs up, people buying cigarettes. So it's really a case-by-case basis, and I think you'll know it when you need one, and just don't be, I would tell you, don't be worried about setting a bad precedent. Nobody can stand up here and say, well, you waived it from Marino's, you gotta waive it for us. Every case is unique.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. The only thing is, the next guy may try to do it, the next guy may try to do it, and the next
Sure.
guy may try to do
Right,
it.
oh, absolutely, right.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I was just gonna say, maybe we should have Gosha got a presentation for us?
Hold on. Any other questions for the applicant from the CDC members?
I just want to say that this is fabulous. If this is what it turns out to be, it's going to be the best piece of property in Wooddale.
Okay.
And the engineer did review, I'm being reminded by my team, the engineer did review the layout, Yes, he didn't review the traffic study, but he reviewed this, and his comments back didn't say, we need a traffic study. He could have said it.
Just for clarification, it wasn't a traffic engineer. It was an engineer who reviewed it for stormwater requirements and just the regular engineering requirements, not for traffic.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
But
from the city's standpoint, you're recommending waiving this, correct?
It's up to CDC. As staff, we cannot
Your recommendation was in here, right?
for the petition. The staff does not have the authority to waive this requirement.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant before we move on to staff?
Yeah, on Ash, if you went with diagonal parking, you would lose spots, right?
Diagonal parking would work on, well, I guess you could do it on Ash, but it would be best to do perpendicular parking, that way people heading northbound and southbound can pull into the parking. And you would, yes, you would lose parking spots.
Yeah. I just don't know how deep that is coming off the curbside, off of Ash, for, if you did diagonal.
If you did diagonal, actually,
You'd have to go in more,
it would be more,
and,
more intrusive into the street.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
You know, actually, what we, I just did want to point out, whenever we did do the parking on Ash, we redesigned the sidewalks, so the parking was farther away from, was farther to the west, so it was less of an impact to the current condition on
Alright.
Ash for traffic.
Okay, does staff have a presentation?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. I'm just going to switch between our presentations. So just to kind of sum up the requests that are in front of the CDC, we have a special use for a planned unit development. This submittal is for a combined concept and final development plan, which is something that is authorized under the UDO. There was a site plan review component, but that's something that's done by staff. And there also is a lot consolidation. Similarly to the prior petition, it will go directly to City Council, but everything is kind of part of the same project. There we go. So the location, I think we're pretty familiar with the site. We're at the corner of Irving Park and Ash. Currently, the subject property is vacant. It was acquired by the city quite some time ago, and there was an existing building that was demolished in order to enable redevelopment of the site. The city council authorized a purchase agreement with the current owners back in 2021, and they've been working since then on the redevelopment, which is presented to CDC tonight. The existing conditions, we mentioned the 2 lots that will be consolidated. We are a little bit over half an acre of site, of the half an acre for the combined lots. The zoning of the property is C2A Southeast Irving Park Corridor Commercial. You may recall this is a brand new zoning district that was created back in May of 2022. I do want to clarify that the regulations for this zoning district actually require the PUD process. In the UDO, it was noted that there were 3 different types of redevelopment that could go in there, and they had different scenarios in terms of like how far the building is from the site, where the parking goes, and so on. It so happened that the development that this applicant was looking for did not fit within those 3 preset standards, which requires them to pursue a PUD process. So that's why it's being considered today. This is just existing condition of the site, so as you may recall it as right now, it's just a vacant lot. In terms of the proposed condition, a lot of this was covered before. We have a new restaurant building. There will be future potential rooftop dining. There will be outdoor dining on ground. We have a total of 29 parking spaces on site, and there are the 10 on-street parking spaces that will be regulated by a parking license agreement that was negotiated between the property owners and the city. We actually have a copy of the signed agreement already in our files. There will be new site and parking lot landscaping. The actual landscape plan is not in the presentation, but it was part in your packet. And the couple parking islands that were discussed, they're missing. not a very significant location because they're located to other landscaping that's already on site. In terms of stormwater detention, there will be some permeable pavers in the parking lot, and there will be an aggregate storage underneath, so essentially underground storage. And our city engineers have reviewed the preliminary plans. Obviously, they're not in final state yet. A lot of that will be finalized during the final permitting process. So a lot of the PUD essentially is dependent on the final engineering approval, but our engineers are, they feel comfortable saying that the comments that remain will be able to be addressed during the permitting process. In terms of the proposed elevations, you may recall that our code actually has very specific design standards now in terms of materials that need to be used. At least 50% of the elevations that are visible from the street must be durable material. So the main exterior materials that are being proposed, excuse me, are dry stack stone. We have some cut stone porcelain panels. There will be composite siding, stained cedar, steel, and board and batten siding. But if you recall in the staff memo, the architect prepares specific calculations in terms of what part, excuse me, of the elevation will be stone and porcelain, and they do meet that 50% requirement. So moving on to the compliance with the UDO. The applicant did mention all of the deviations that are being listed. Once again, because we're going through a PUD process, the deviations allow the applicant more flexibility, and they could request relief from any of the requirements in the UDO. The lot area, that one is, we already talked about the lot consolidation. It's very limited. There's no other land available, so that's why they're seeking a deviation for the lot size. The front build-to line, also very specific to the zoning district. Typically, we see these minimum setback requirements. This one has a particular build-to line where the building has to be built at that line. In this case, the building's shifted a little bit more to the west to accommodate the sidewalk that separates the on-street parking spaces in the building and also the outdoor dining. We have a fence height that was also discussed. This is for the outdoor dining fencing, and our recent UDO changed, actually amendment changed the maximum height from 4 to 3, so they're actually seeking a deviation to be allowed to do a 4-foot fence. The driveway offset, just for clarification, this is not a new requirement in the UDO. It was in the prior version as well. We actually see this a lot, especially on properties that are on Irving Park Road, because the properties are smaller and there are a lot of curb cuts. It's very difficult to design a parking lot that will be directly aligned or offset by 150 feet because there are so many curb cuts. And also the applicants are choosing to use one of the existing curb cuts that are on site, just making a little bit wider. So this is, I would say, one of the requirements that we see quite a lot on development such as this one. The parking setback, that is directly in the C2A requirements. It says the front setback has to be at least 5 feet away. I think in this case, the parking on North is about 5 feet away from the property line. We also have the parking transition that we discussed. It's mainly for the 2 parking spaces that are for the pickup. So number 6 on the plan. From what I recall looking at the engineering plans, the parking lot was redesigned so that the street transition, which is 30 feet off of Irving Park Road, was met, and I believe the 10-foot off the alley was also met. The key here is that we measure from the property line to kind of where the parking lot space starts. The landscape islands we briefly talked about. There are parking islands that will be presented, but some of them are smaller in size. I believe some of them are reduced from 7 to 5 feet. There's a couple that will be eliminated completely. And then the traffic study, that's something that was discussed earlier. As we mentioned, the UDO, the PUD requirements specifically require traffic study. Staff, this is something that we've discussed with the applicant a number of times, and essentially they have the option to seek this waiver. That is not something the city staff can approve or authorize. In terms of compliance with the comprehensive plan, I think the applicant did a really great job. This definitely meets the comprehensive plan. It's designated as retail commercial in the future land use plan, so it is in compliance and it meets a number of goals and objectives and was listed specifically in our staff memo. It's a vacant property, underutilized property, specifically on Irving Park Road, and definitely this will be an opportunity for redevelopment of the site and perhaps maybe just for some further development in that area. In terms of the public comment, let me just go back a little bit. We did not receive any public comment regarding this petition. Therefore, obviously the number of variations and deviations that are being requested and the traffic waiver, that's something that is for consideration by CDC. But overall, we find that the application is consistent with the comprehensive plan and with the UDO, and we recommend approval. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Okay. Does the applicant have any questions for staff?
No, sir.
Okay, great. Is there any member of the public who wishes to make a statement? Yes, sir. Why don't you approach the podium, please?
Would you raise your right hand?
Yes, yes.
State your name and address, please.
Richard Malinowski, 212 Ash Avenue.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not very good at public speaking, so please forgive me. I own the building that is, well, actually, I guess right here. This is the building directly behind the proposed Marino's restaurant. And I have, yeah, that building, that two-story building, and then all the way up to that tan door, like if you see from the white door is the Italian club, but my property is from the start of the high building all the way to the, there's a lower tan building next to the tan door next to the white door. And I can't really tell where your drive-through is gonna end up coming out. We don't have traffic. Well, I mean where you go in and you exit in the alley and then turn off. I can't tell on my building where this turnoff's gonna be. But I'm just really concerned about people parking on my property. I mean, you know, I'm not sure where your entranceway door is gonna be. I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of carry-out business, and even, there's 2 spots in the back, but I'm human. I mean, if I was gonna pick up a pizza, there's no place to park, I'm just gonna be there for 5 minutes, I'm gonna park over here, which would be my spot.
Wait, hold on. We'll take this one at a time.
It'd be my spot.
Go ahead.
So I'm incurring a lot of extra liability. Somebody trips on my lot, on my parking, they're gonna sue me. They're not gonna sue anybody else, or my business, or my building. So I'm incurring a lot of risk because of that. So that's my concern. I don't know how many tables are gonna be in there, but if there's only approximately 40 spots, is that enough for 80 people? If it's an average, I don't know, is there a study that says how many people will be, or during peak time, what's the maximum capacity of people in that restaurant? If there's much more capacity than amount of parking, the only parking there would be my spots, my 13 or 14 parking spots off the alley, or they might even try parking directly in front of my building, which is another 4 spots. Or they could maybe park across the street on the other guy's private property. But this is a huge problem for me, and even if we have cars, I mean, there are cars that drive through the alley, that go to the tire shop, there's a tire shop in the corner, so there is traffic in there. But I could just see there being a lot of people parking on my property, even though there's tow signs there. You know, I'd be incurring a lot of liability because of that. I mean, if I could put a fence up on my parking, to have my parking fenced off, or barricaded in some way, I probably could deal with that. But that's gonna be an expense I'll have to incur also. I think I'd approach the city about me putting a fence there or a barricade on my parking, because there was, besides Ready Electric, which became a resale shop or something briefly, there was a auto repair place or a couple of auto repair places, and all the customers would pull onto my thing, go in, hey, I wanna have my car fixed, you know, and then they'd pull out, you know, but they would be parked there for, you know, an hour, half hour. Every time they park there, I'm incurring a chance of liability. If they trip, they fall, run over somebody going behind their car hits somebody, I'm just incurring extra liability. And that's what I'm concerned about. I mean, I love the idea of a restaurant being there, it looks great. I love cannoli, you know, but this liability problem, the extra traffic, I mean, we have a small business, I only usually have 5, 6 cars there, but I have nobody parked there on Saturdays or Sundays or Friday nights, and that's, you're gonna have a lot of activity there. And I really don't wanna have the situation either where I'm calling tow truck people to remove people that park to go to this restaurant. I don't wanna be, oh, that guy's a bad guy, no, he's having our cars towed all the time. I don't wanna be put in that situation either.